The sacred grounds of Slane Castle on the banks of the River Boyne. In 1981, Lord Henry led the charge, and over 2 million people have enjoyed. The music of the legends who have breached the castle walls, from Jersey rockers to royalty, legends one and all. One man was at Lord Henry's side from the outset, through thick and thin, his eldest, Alex Conyngham, who kindly invited us in. To tell us stories new and old, to satiate the thirst for knowledge from behind the scenes of Ireland's greatest host. So first of all, Mr. Alex Conyngham, thank you so much for welcoming us into your fine house here, steeped in Irish music history. It's an absolutely fantastic venue and home, I should say. But one question I'd like to ask to kick it all off: what is it like to wake up here every day in a castle that's so steeped in music history?
Yeah, well, it's changed a bit recently. So I grew up here as a kid, but it was a fairly hectic place to grow up because mum and dad, had to hustle to kind of keep the show on the road, and of course that included stepping into the gigs. But we had car launches, we had weddings, we had all kinds of stuff, so you never knew what was happening every day, and we were kids running around upstairs probably causing havoc. And then when the fire happened in 91, which was a tough time, the building basically it wasn't possible to live here, and then it was restored in 2001 and then became a very busy business again. And then that stayed the way. So the family kind of stayed here a bit, but they didn't live here. And then COVID was, the storm that hit us all. And unfortunately, we had to shut down everything. And then we actually sat in this room and met as a family. And Dad kind of said, well, what about moving in? And we were living on the farm at that stage. And so myself, Karina, and the kids did precisely that. And we moved in. Karina pointed out that Dad was also asking us to take over the business, and there was no business at that stage. So we're now in the process of rebuilding the business whilst also trying to live here. So it's kind of history repeating, and now my kids are getting to go through what I did. But when you live in a relatively small farmhouse and move into the castle, it's a little different, that's for sure.
I suppose just going back to the very beginning, Alex, and the whole vision of hosting a rock concert in your back garden, as it were. Like, where did that all come from? Was that a passion of your dad's from the very start, or was he inspired? Or
so, I mean, Dad's a child of the 60s, and that was a very exciting 60s and 70s, brilliant, exciting time in music, the advent of rock and roll. And so he loved his music, and I grew up with, Hendrix and the Stones and the Doors and everything blasting on the hi-fi upstairs. And he'd wanted to kind of do a gig. He got the idea from Nebworth, really, in the UK. And we were struggling financially, to try and keep the show on the road, because unfortunately in this place there's always more going out and coming in, just the nature of the building and preserving the heritage. But he didn't know how to put a gig on. And he was then approached by Eamon McCann, who was one half of what was to become MCD with Dennis Desmond. And Eamon walked into his office one day, and the kind of rest is history, and said, have you ever thought about putting a gig on here? And Dad's like, you're the guy, potentially I've been looking for. And they all took a punt. They were all very young in the industry. Dad had never done a gig before, and they kind of chanced their arm, and they made that first gig happen in 81.
It was so groundbreaking. Like, there was nothing else like that on the island of Ireland. And with, as you mentioned, Nebworth was happening in the UK, and everyone knows like Woodstock in the US and stuff like that. But this was groundbreaking for Ireland, an outdoor venue where people could come and see the biggest rock acts in the world.
Yeah.
And it's been a legacy ever since.
It has. But the first show, in 81, obviously Thin Lizzy were the headline. Thin Lizzy were a favourite act of Dad's anyway. He used to close the nightclub with Whiskey in the Jar as his closing tune if he got on the decks after a few whiskies. So he had a love for the band, but international acts didn't really come to Ireland, especially the big ones, because it was kind of seen as a small peripheral market, but also because of the context of the Troubles, a risky place to play, and so the first show was completely groundbreaking, but I think it was when the Stones arrived in '82, which was a real kind of coup for Dad and being able to bring them into Ireland. And once the Stones arrived, that put Ireland on the map. And it kind of paved the way for international acts to start coming into this country. And, I think we were a bit starved of that. If you wanted to go and see a big act, you had to travel to the UK. And now suddenly the Rolling Stones were in Ireland and at Slane, and that sealed our reputation. But the first gig was amazing and a completely crazy thing to do in the context of post-hunger strikes and everything else. But there was no trouble that day. It was just all about the music. We're a nation that loves music, so it was a fun journey for Dad to have started.
It looks really wonderful. We haven't done, we've done stadiums so far on this tour. We've done before in England. We've done this kind of thing. And usually they're lovely. I prefer them to a stadium. It's hot weather now. We hope it's still going to be warm or not raining at least.
Feels a bit surreal, but I'm looking forward to it. 25 years later, I wanted to come back with a bang. What better than a bigger bang tour and the Rolling Stones?
Alex, in regards to some of the biggest acts in the world that have graced your back garden as such, or the venue that the people of Ireland know to be Slane, as you mentioned, you have Thin Lizzy, the Stones, Springsteen, U2, Metallica. You moved with the times during the 90s and even in modern times to give the people what they want. Harry Styles, Eminem, Madonna, the Oasis. There's been quite a versatile mix. I'm sure you've had plenty of experience meeting them all.
Met a few, yeah.
Who have been some of your favourite people that you've had the joy or the pleasure of meeting with?
Of actually meeting, I mean, I guess two come to mind, probably maybe the most two recent, like Harry Styles, and there was a bit of pushback when Harry came in, but you've got to be careful as a venue to not get pigeonholed, say, just into rock and roll. And like Harry Styles, when he played here in 23, was without doubt the biggest artist in the world commercially, hugely successful, and kind of takes pop, but is also himself a big fan of the likes of Bowie and Jagger and all the rest. So he wanted to play where some of his heroes had played. And I think what was exciting for me about the Harry Styles gig was it introduced a whole new suite of fans to the venue, but not only to Slane, to actually live music in general. I spoke to several fans and it was their first ever live music experience. And if you can give someone a good live music experience as their first one, then they're committed to live music for life. And that's really important for artists, for the sector, and just generally for a good life journey, I think. And I met Harry. He was actually sitting outside our window of this room, and my son spotted him, and anyway we ended up going out and having a chat, and he was very gracious and made a point of thanking Dad more than me, but just recognizing how important this venue is and how much it meant to him to be able to play where some of his heroes had. So that was probably one of my most recent interactions. I know you guys are fans of Metallica as well, and I've admired Metallica for not just musically, but actually as a band that takes care of their fans. They're probably one of the best in the business. Harry would be up there as well. So Metallica family and everything. And I was lucky enough to meet them, and they were also very gracious. There was one funny story in that Lars came out to say hello, and my son was learning to play the drums at the time. And so he was a little starstruck, and I had Dad there, and my son Rory, myself, my wife, and Dad is normally the guy that you would say hello to. But Lars deliberately totally ignored Dad, ignored me, and he went straight to my son. And he said, now, kid, you're the one I need to pay attention to here. And Dad's like, what's going on here? And he said, because I might want to come back here in my Zimmer frame one day and play Slane, and I'm going to need your permission to do that. So I thought that was a kind of a clever little play, and Lars is a bit of a joker. So, you know, they were lovely to meet. So that was a nice interaction. I've met many over the years, but those two, maybe just because they're the recent ones, those would pop out for sure.
That's absolutely brilliant. And just what you said about if you deliver a good music experience to start, you'll have people hooked for life. That is a great mindset to proceed forward with in the planning of these events, and what a fabulous gift it is to give someone. Yeah,
I mean, I've always think, you know, gigs aren't just watching a band. It's a whole experience. It's the journey to the show. And, you know, I recognise that going to a gig in Slane is more challenging journey-wise than maybe going to a gig in a stadium in Dublin. But that journey is part of what makes the memories and shapes the experience, and then the journey home and all of that. So, and when you're sitting in a beautiful field surrounded by trees and the River Boyne as a backdrop, I actually would say it's a bit more of a spiritual experience. And that's always been very important to Dad and to us as a family. And I think the artists embrace that as well. And the other thing that makes Slane so special, of course, is the fans. And the Irish fans are without doubt some of the best in the world. So you bring all of that together and you've got something very special.
Pilgrimage for music fans.
Yeah, pilgrimage is a good word, and I think it is, and people come from all four corners of the island, and actually increasingly we get international visitors coming to Slane, because, you know, given some of the, particularly in the US, you know, where ticket prices can get very, very high, you know, for someone to jump on a plane, see a bit of Ireland, go to a gig at Slane, you know, we've increasingly seen that start to happen as well.
Yeah, because we've bumped into people at that Metallica show that have travelled from America, from all over Canada.
Sure, Metallica in particular would have a very strong international contingent.
Yeah, but like you said, like coming to a venue like this, you're getting it all. Like you said, you can make a short vacation out of it. Take in probably the best venue in Europe, you know, with the best fans. It's more than the music. It's the social thing. It's the experience, and it's the memories. Yeah,
I mean, we've got stories of people who met at the gig, became friends at the gig, people who fell in love at the gig. I think before we were talking, there was the couple who got photographed having a smooch at the Springsteen gig. We even had a fan who you know, sadly passed away and asked for the ashes to be scattered on the ground because the Springsteen gig was such a seminal moment in her life, which of course we were very willing to facilitate. So I think music as a sense of connection is incredibly important, and live music takes that to another level. So I think, you know, we curate music experiences here, but we're also very mindful that we're creating experiences and shaping memories, and that's a very privileged thing to be able to be involved in.
All of those memories that have been shaped with the memorable concerts, Alex, I'm sure bringing some of the biggest acts in music into your home and your back garden can be stressful enough at times too. Yeah. Have there been any shows or any moments leading up to the gigs where you're like, I don't know if this is going to get across the line?
Yeah, I mean, weather, you've always got to watch the weather, and that can be kind of stressful. We have a pretty good history on that front, to the extent that, like, geez, what is Henry doing? Does he have a deal with the man upstairs, or what's going on? But we have had some wet ones. Foo Fighters in particular was a weather challenge, but like Dave Grohl was a complete hero, and he and the band got totally soaked along with everyone else, and actually the atmosphere was probably one of the better ones.
I will never forget being in the pit for that.
Yeah.
And the guy I was with had a younger brother.
Right.
And the security guard was kind enough to let the whole family into the gold circle.
Nice.
And when David come out in that red flannel shirt and the opening for Everlong, everyone, like a Mexican wave, it was absolutely amazing.
It set the tone.
Yeah, it really did.
Yeah, I think he made a point of coming out to the front of the stage where he would get drenched straight away.
And
Like
which
the crowd,
is-
he didn't stand back.
No, he didn't stand back, and you know, that's like a proper artist who appreciates the audience, you know. And those moments, there's been lots of those good moments at Slane over the years, but I guess in terms of challenging ones, some of the gigs have been challenging. Sometimes it's the personalities, sometimes it's just logistics and traffic and all of that. So I think you never stop learning, and our job as the venue and then obviously the promoters we work with, which has mainly been MCD over the years, we're always looking to improve and kind of make it a better experience for the fans, and I guess for the artists, but fans always come first. So we've had some nerve-wracking moments. The first Guns N' Roses gig in 92, they came back in 2017 and they were a very different band. You know, there was a lot more going on in their lives in 92, and the behavior maybe was a little different. There was concerns about, they were late on stage, and that caused a lot of tension. Myself and Dad had to go down backstage and sort a few things out. And I won't go into the ins and outs of that, but that was probably one of the scarier moments we've dealt with. But overall, we've been pretty lucky so far. Obviously, the river, we have had some tragedies there, but that's a long time ago now. And again, massive increase in terms of monitoring the river and messaging around trying to get into the river or crossing it and everything else. So I think over the years, we've consistently, I hope, delivered a great experience. And there's been some tense moments. Oasis was a lively one, for sure. Just the nature of the crowd, you know. And when you throw Prodigy and Kasabian in there as well, that's never going to be a quiet audience.
No,
but it was a great
show, though.
It was an amazing show,
an
amazing show. But in terms of kind of policing and managing, maybe a little tougher. But you know, it goes with the territory, and you know what you're getting into.
100%.
For sure.
Get your Guns N' Roses tapes, there you go. Get your Guns N' Roses. In the shade, Lord Henry Mount Charles, keeping his fingers crossed that everything will go smoothly.
So proud, you know, they're only here to hear the music. They're not here to fight or anything like that. They're just here to enjoy the music and the band.
People might think that girls they should like stay to pop and slow songs and things like that, but like girls like to get out there and enjoy themselves as well, so they like that.
And that was literally straight after the fire in 1991. And it was, in a sense, the rebirth of Slane. This castle was rebuilt on rock and roll. So to be here 25 years later, still able to do this stuff is a real thrill for us as a family. And I'll never forget the first show, and I'm sure as hell not going to forget the second. The first show had its own idiosyncrasies. I'm sure this will too.
The new chapter then, Alex, now that you're at the helm, what does the new chapter look like for Slane? I know you've expanded different things like Rock Farm and the Slane Whiskey, of course, like that. Is there anything else you'd like to
well, I think, you've got to keep evolving. We haven't had a gig since 23, and although I'm at the helm kind of running things day to day, Dad, thankfully, is still very much involved, particularly on the gigs. Like, that's his baby, and so he's very involved in that. We're fighting right now to try and bring the gigs back. I'd love to see a gig every year. That's what I want to get back to, and we're working on a new way to do that maybe right now. So hopefully we'll be back in 26. But then I want to extend our cultural realm whilst leaning into music, extend it into other realms. So we're launching an art fair this year called Kime, which is the Irish word for sanctuary, and that's about nurturing a relationship with artists and the landscape and the building. I hope that will become an annual event, trying to pull international art buyers into Ireland in the same way we do with the music fans. And then we've got Rock Farm across the way where you can glamp and do saunas, and we've done smaller festivals as well. Yes. Other side. So we're about the big gig for sure, and I need those back, but we have to continue to evolve. We do quite a lot of film location stuff. We've just had The Traitors here, which will be screening on RT in September this year. So you've got to keep your eyes open.
So Alex, on the topic of Slane Castle coming back to potentially being a show a year, is there any artist that you would love to see here that hasn't yet played?
I'm always careful asking that question because it leads to rumours. There's certainly acts that I wish had played here that we missed. We've never done an electronic lead. I'd love to have done Daft Punk. I think that would have been an awesome gig.
Great show.
Just on that show. And then I suppose as a nod to Dad, if I could wind back the clock, I'd take the Doors for sure. Yeah. One of the most kind of interesting bands because you never knew what the hell they were going to do, and it's a hybrid between rock and jazz, and Morrison would go off on a tangent, Manzarek would go off, and it was amazing live. Yeah. So those are two in particular that I think I would, and then kind of in who's around at the moment, I'll leave that for the guessing game if that's okay.
I think there's one band that I think everyone would love to see here, and that is the AC/DC that everybody speaks about.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, Dad tried to get them for years, in fairness, and I would have loved to have seen them. And the show that did happen in Ireland, I think should have been at Slane, and I won't kind of get into why that didn't happen, but it was certainly disappointing, you know, not just for us, but I think fans would have liked to have seen that at Slane. So I'll be honest, I think that was a bit of a miss.
Yeah, I think so too. I think this place would have just been, I don't think there's any words what it would have been like.
Yeah.
Epic, yeah.
Yeah, it would have been.
It wouldn't have had the same feel,
Yeah.
you know, as, you know, Croke Park or whatever. Like, it would have been so much better here, but, you know, never know.
Well, here we are, David, in the relative splendour of Slane.
Yeah.
It is quite nice here, isn't it?
It's absolutely beautiful.
Now, I do know that Mick Jagger told you quite a lot about here. He seemed to think that the Stones had a great time here.
Oh, he loved it. He thought it was the most beautiful place to play. He said looking out from the stage, it was the most attractive looking sight that he'd ever worked
They also
on.
tell me that you went up and down the Boyne earlier on today. Is that
Yeah,
true?
we had just a little boat ride up and down, yeah. Very, very
Waiting for
nice.
the people with no tickets.
Oh, that's cold.
Oh, well.
I guess it's one of those, it's like Wembley Stadium and, you know, the legendary gigs that if you become successful enough you get to do. I remember the first day we played with R.E.M, it was really hot, sunny, and I don't know, I guess we kind of got a sense of what was possible after playing to all those many people.
From the point to the RDS to Lansdowne to this was always the goal, was to play Slane. So it's a great thrill. I came all this way to prove how much I look forward to being here at Slane.
When it comes to talking about modern superstars in this day and age, the last act has been Harry Styles.
Yeah.
And I know that sometimes it can be a bone of contention with booking these acts that they can't do multiple nights if that's what they request.
Yeah.
I could only imagine what it would be like if a megastar like Taylor Swift, who might be the hottest priority at the minute, could come to town.
Yeah. I mean, multiple gigs. The only time you've done it was U2 in 2001, and the shows were a week apart. And, you know, there were challenges around that. I'm very mindful of the effect that it has on the village of Slane, and the people have been very supportive, and you need to be considerate there. But you know, we're looking at kind of all possibilities to find a way to bring the gigs back. So I think kind of, you know, let's see what we come up with. But you're right, you know, the industry has kind of stratified. You've got very big artists who want to do multiple days back to back. And that in turn makes it harder for artists that are a tier below that, because Slane's capacity is 80,000, and you know, you need to hit a certain number in order to make it viable. So artists are almost either too big and they want to do, you know, Slane's not big enough, or they're not big enough to fill it, and you've definitely seen the industry kind of stratifying. So we need to respond to that, and that's what we're trying to figure out.
Finding that middle ground.
Exactly.
It'll be exciting to see where it goes next.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Arms entwined like a chosen. The newspaper says it's true. It's true, it's true. We could break through. Oh, 22, we can't be
Can I just ask, Alex, what's your favourite band that have actually played Slane through the years? Whether it be a headliner or
yeah, I mean,
supporting.
I get asked that a bit. I've got pretty eclectic tastes. I think musically, and if I have it right, you were in a Pearl Jam tribute at one point. So Neil Young was supported by Pearl Jam here, and Van Morrison was on the bill, and actually in another amazing band, Booker T and the MGs. Like musically, that was a really important gig for me, because there was actually quite a lot of collaboration between Neil Young and Pearl Jam on the day, and that was just really special. So that's only something you would get in a live context, so that's probably up there musically for me. I would have been a big Guns N' Roses fan in '92, and I'll never forget once we finally got them on stage. But you know, when Axl he opened with Night Train, and like that was a pretty epic moment. You were talking about Dave Grohl's opening with Everlong, like that was definitely up there as well. I was down there for that moment too, and it was pretty epic. So I think I take something from every gig. It's really hard to put one up. I suppose the last one I'll finish with would have been the first time I realised how powerful live music was, and I was a kid, and it was the Queen gig, and Freddie came off stage for a while to do whatever Freddie does, and Brian May played an amazing solo, which is a tough thing to do when you've got that big a crowd. It's probably the biggest crowd we ever had, and on the last note, the crowd hadn't quite erupted into applause, and then Freddie came out in that moment with the most unbelievable note, and the whole crowd went wild. And I was a kid sitting just outside this window, and I remember realizing then, like, this, how powerful that was. So that's probably when it dawned on me for the first time. It really sank in how special this whole experience is.
That's amazing. I can feel the passion coming out of you with music. I'm actually getting a little bit of goosebumps thinking of like all them shows that you've seen, but it's great to see that your passion is still there and the future is looking good for Slane Castle.
Yeah, please God, I hope so. Live music is something that everybody needs to experience. There's just nothing quite like it.
Yeah, 100%. Well, it's been an honour to take up a part of your day today and sitting there and having a chat with us. We really appreciate it, and best of luck in the future for everything.
Yeah, thanks lads, appreciate it.
Alex, massive thanks for sharing your experience and welcoming us into your home.
Yeah, no problem at all.